we'll just have to proceed as it is. So we were looking at the topic of what defines a human being, and the thoughts of Revolba in his Alei Shur on the matter. And we had moved on to the second chapter on the topic, in which Revolba was looking at some of the Mamori Chazal, some of the statements of Chazal that define Mahu Odom. What does it mean to be a person? What is a person? And we were at the bottom of page Chof Daled, page 24 in Revolba, the first page of the second chapter in the handout sheets, which I hope people have managed to download from the website. And in it, on the bottom of the page, Revolba introduces to us a new Mama Chazal, a new statement of the sages, a statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Omer Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Odom. What is a human being? What is an Odom? Ofer, Dam, and Mora. It's the spells out the Rosh Tevos, the initials of Afer, ashes, Dam, blood, and Mora, which is bile. Now, Mora is not a term we're familiar with, and Rashi explains and helps us understand. Lama nikra shmo Odom. Why is a person called Odom? Shur Afer, Dam, and Mora. We're made up of very physical components. We have the Afer, the carbon within ourselves, perhaps we would say in modern parlance, Dam, which is the blood, and Mora. Koloma, kuloi hevel. We are completely, hevel literally means smoke. It means completely, or steam rather, completely temporary, with no proper permanence. Lekach al yiskoya. Therefore, a person shouldn't feel arrogance. A person should know that they are very physical beings. Mora hu lachluchis, mora hayotze min hamarira shabekovid umiskabra ba'odom. Mora are the liquids that come out of the bile duct in the liver and overwhelm a person. Hakol lefi achadoshim v'shinay itim. Everything based upon the time of years. Well, if we turn to the top of the next page, and the food that a person eats, and through them come illness and affliction and pains. There's various terms for the biles. There's the black bile and the red bile, etc. So the science of Rashi, as he's explaining this, we don't need to go into. This is referring to the ancient theories of the different component parts of the body. But the essence of what Rashi is saying is that a person, according to this Gemara, an Odom, a person is made up of these three components: the Afer, the ash, which we would nowadays translate as carbon, the body of the person; the Dam, the blood system; and then the Mora, which we would perhaps translate in modern terms as the hormonal and chemical system that keeps the chemical balances within the body. Now, why is this important for us to understand that that's what a person is? Asks Revolba, Ha'im ha'odom hurak Afer Dam Mora? Is this all a person is? Is a person just Afer and Dam and Mora? Hello, Tzelem and Akim. Surely a person is made in the image of God. Surely what we are taught is that the most important part of a person is their spirit. On that answers Revolba, Omnon, however, if a person identifies themselves, there's a hot to identify themselves with their bodies, and thinks that the main and most important part of a person is their body, will be able to correct him and say, the body is just the physical flesh of a person rather than the person themselves. However, a person who knows and really internalizes their importance and their stature, will say that they identify themselves with their body deliberately to realize their physical weaknesses. Adam Rishon took pride in the fact that he was drawn from the earth. And this is, as Rashi explains, because the person realizes that they are made of temporary parts and therefore shouldn't become arrogant. Someone understands genuinely their qualities. So what Rav Wolbe is saying here is a very wonderful idea. And he's saying that in our spiritual development, we sometimes need to remind ourselves of the spiritual side of ourselves, and sometimes deliberately, almost as a later stage, we need to remind ourselves of the physical component, the physical side of ourselves. When he says a person who is undeveloped in their spirituality needs to work on reminding themselves that they're not just a physical being, but that they're a spiritual being, that they're a person who has a ruach, a spirit within themselves, a dimension of intellect, of mind, of emotion, of spirituality, of neshama, of consciousness, which means that we are elevated beings. However, someone who has a spiritual stature, who lives with an awareness of what it means to be a spiritual being, such a person, quite the contrary, such a person needs to remind themselves of the opposite. Such a person needs to reflect and internalize the fact that we're found in physical bodies. We're not just spiritual, we're not just neshamas, we're not just souls, but we are souls which are embodied, which are dwell within a physical body. And why is that important for us to know? In order to realize and remember to what degree we're affected by the physical experiences that we undergo. So it's very, very interesting. The mussar one needs to give a person, the spiritual sensitivity that one needs to develop is dependent upon where one is up to in one's spiritual life. And there are times in one's spiritual life that one needs to remind oneself, don't forget, you're not just a body. Don't forget, I'm also a neshama. And there are times in one's life when one needs to remind oneself, no, I'm an Adam. An Adam means I'm made of these very physical and temporary components. And if one does so, the kach lo yitzga'eh, says Rashi, quoted in Rav Wolbe, through that a person won't come to mistaken arrogance. Why is it important for us to remember that we're in physical bodies? Because we need to realize to what degree we are influenced by the physical circumstances that we experience. And if we don't remember that, then we're out of touch with what it means to be a human being. Often, by the way, one is taught in the early stages of understanding Yiddishkeit. As children, we're often told, who is the real me? The real me is my neshama. Now, there is a value in that message. Of course, it's important for us to remember that the real me is our spiritual side, the decisions, the spiritual decisions that we take, the moral decisions that we take, and how we develop ourselves accordingly. However, if we stop there, then we're going to have a very limited perspective, a very limited view on what it really means to be a person. And in fact, in our davening, we say the very opposite. We say, Elokai neshama shenosata bi tahurahi. Hashem, the neshama that you have placed inside me is pure. That means to say that the neshama isn't me. The neshama shenosata bi tahurahi. The soul that you've put in me is pure, but I myself am me. So if we think that when I say I am referring to our neshama, we're missing something. Because we're not just an neshama. We are a being which consists of many parts, including our guf. And therefore we can say, Elokai neshama shenosata bi. The neshama that you put in me, I am not identical to my neshama. Why is it important for us to remember that? Because only if we remember that can we understand how we operate. And the degree to which we're influenced by our physical circumstances is remarkable. We can look at the same situation in the same scenario, and we can feel it's horrible and it's just unbearable and everything's gloomy and the atmosphere is so depressed and no one's enjoying themselves and this is all going wrong and everyone's being irritating. And all of what this is coming from, it's just simply overtiredness. It's just simply brain chemicals, the mora, which Rashi referenced us in his explanation of the Gemara, making us feel that way. And then something changes. We go and have a little rest. We maybe even just have a cup of coffee. And suddenly there's few granules of coffee and we view the whole situation differently. Suddenly that quarter of an hour power nap And suddenly the situation's not so bad, and actually it's quite positive, and I can cope with it, and they're not being so irritating. And therefore it's important for us to do chazara, to do revision constantly on this idea. To remind ourselves, when I say, what am I as a human being? Yes, important to focus on the neshama, the ruach, the spiritual aspect of this, but also important for us to remember, Odom. Odom, translation, Apheh, the carbon that makes us up, Dam, the blood that flows through the system, and Mem, the mora, the chemical and hormonal balance that we find in our bodies. And this is therefore the final paragraph that Rav Wolbe says in this section over here. We're on page Kafei for those who have only managed to get through now. On page 25 in the handout, he says, Od Zos on Unamedim Edivrei Rashi al Hamora. We learn further from the words of Rashi on the Mora. Ki Odom Eino Yatziv B'Tivoi. A person is not stable in their nature. The passing of time and the food that we eat and the physical circumstances that we undergo affect our spirit, our moods. No person is found the whole time completely stable. And therefore a person needs to constantly work on their weakness. In other words, there's no such thing as a person who doesn't undergo physical circumstances, physical changes. These changes will affect how we feel about these things. These changes will affect how we operate, how we view the situation. And in an identical situation, just because of what time of day it is, or just because of what we happen to have eaten previously, that would affect our whole mood and the whole way we assess it and the whole way we view it. And this is remarkable and humbling. And this is the dual message of Rashi. We cannot be stable in life. An hour later, a day later, we confront exactly the same situation and we respond completely differently because we're a little bit more tired or a little bit less tired because something has changed in what we've eaten. We've got a little bit more sugar in our blood, a little bit less sugar, and suddenly everything is different. And therefore, Rav Wolbe says in very strong language, based on the thoughts of Rashi, Vein Adam ba'olam hanimtza tomid b'matzav ruach shaveh. There's ein Adam ba'olam. There's not a single person in the world, a single person who is tamid b'matzav ruach shaveh, who's always in the same matzav ruach, who's always in the same mood, feeling and experiencing the same about a situation. And we need to remind ourselves of this constantly. And this is a theme that Rav Wolbe is going to look at in more detail in the next paragraph. But this is meant to be humbling also, because it's meant to remind us that we can't trust our instincts. We can't trust just how intuitively we feel about a situation. We can't always trust our recollection of a situation, because even between ourselves, within ourselves, between different times of the day or different times of the week, or different alertness and how tired we are, that can also completely how we feel about something. And we can think that what we're saying is objective. We can think that what we're saying reflects how things are in an absolute sense. And this is reminding ourselves to always question, is this subjective? Is this merely the chemistry talking, the brain chemistry talking, rather than the ruach, rather than the inner me itself? So this is the first thought that we're looking at today. The Rav Wolbe shares here based upon this Mama Chazal. In a few moments, he's going to bring another quote from a Gemara, which is going to develop this theme in a different direction, but with one that has overlaps from what we've just said. But before I go further, are there any questions about what we've read so far? Otherwise, we'll move on. I've muted everyone. If anyone wants to unmute themselves to say something, then please do so. Okay, so we'll move on. If anyone wants to ask something, also please use the chat facility. Okay, so Rav Wolbe carries on and says as follows: how are we meant to make sense of this complex being that is a person? So in the beginning of the paragraph on page Kafei, the middle paragraph on page Kafei, introduced with the letter Daled. If you don't have the handouts, you can click on the website and you can download this. Selem udamut. A person is made up of a godlike form. A person can stand face to face in front of his or her creator. So we human beings are capable, at our best, at our greatest, of rising to prophecy. We're capable of standing there on Yom Kippur, davening, standing in front of Hashem, speaking face to face. Me'idach, on the other hand, what we saw last week, Av Nizokin, a person is a mazik. We saw this last week, in which the Gemara translates a particular technical term. We're not going through it again. A person is a walking minefield. A person can leave in their wake a trail of destruction, almost unaware of what they're doing. The Efer, Dam, and Mara. And we've also explained a person is made up of these very physical components of bloods and chemicals and carbon. How do we unify? How do we find the achdut, the commonality between these parts? The yashlimu b'neim, and make peace between them. Or is a person condemned to always be split, always be ruptured, always be bifurcated between these different dimensions of their being? So how can a person integrate themselves into one holistic creature when we are made up of so many different dimensions? And Rav Wolbe answers, the answer to the question, he says, is that there is one force within our makeup, our psyche, that can unify these different elements. There's one part which unifies and completes a person. And here again, he uses a technical Gemara to bring this out. So I'm just going to introduce the technical Gemara, and then we'll read it inside. And there's a Gemara that picks up on the language of a pasuk. The pasuk talks about the power and force of a shavua, an oath. We know that in halacha we take honesty very seriously, and a shavua, someone makes a promise, a formal promise using the language of a shavua or a neder. There's an expectation that someone will keep their word, and this is in halacha considered one of the most serious things. Now, when the pasuk describes the language of a shavua, it doesn't say, as it would normally say in Hebrew, when one makes a shvua, but it uses the language of the pasuk of ha'odom b'shvua. It keeps on emphasizing when an odom, when a person makes a shvua. And the Gemara picks up on this nuance of language, and it says this excludes someone who says a shavua in a state of when they are anus, which in Hebrew means when they are not fully conscious or aware or responsible for what they are doing. In such a situation, the person is anus, and his shavua doesn't have the force of an oath. And then the Gemara brings something very remarkable. The Gemara continues this halacha, and it brings a story of two of the greatest Amoraim, Rav Kahana and Rav Asi. And these two Amoraim were students of Rav, and they had an argument about a particular halachic ruling of Rav. And one of them said, I'm absolutely convinced this is what Rav, the great Amora, had taught us, and I make a shavua, an oath that this is what he said. And the other one says, I'm absolutely convinced this isn't the case, and he said something different, and made a shavua also to the opposite. And the Gemara continues the story. This is a Gemara in Shavuos, in the Masechta in the Talmud and Shas that deals with oaths. And it says that eventually they went to Rav and they asked which one he said, and he said, I said like A, not like B. I said like one of you. The Gemara doesn't record which one got it right and which one got it wrong, perhaps to reserve, to avoid any embarrassment caused to the one who got it wrong. And one of them got it right, one of them got it wrong. And then the Gemara asks, are we talking about people? So the one who got it wrong said, did I make an oath lying? Am I a lie over here? Alei, and Rav answered him, Liboch anosach. Your heart forced you into this. In other words, you thought that what you were saying was right, and you fooled yourself. This pasuk that tells us that one is culpable for shavua, when odom b'shvua, and the person is fully conscious, fully aware, fully cognizant of what's going on. In this particular situation, You made the promise based upon a certain and definite assumption, a premise that what you said was right, but actually your heart deceived you. And therefore, this isn't included in the level of responsibility that a person is expected to have when they make a shavua. So when the pasuk talks about Odom b'Shvua, the person has to be fully present when they make an oath. We're talking about where there's complete clarity of vision. There's no clouding of one's perception about what's happened. And if in turn it turns out that there was a clouding of perception, then this isn't the person being fully present. This is the technical halachic point that Rav Wolbe brings from the Gemara in Shavuos. But of course, he's going to bring out from this a psychological or mussar point about what it really means to be a person who's present in the situation. And anyone who knew Rav Wolbe knew this was an area that he spoke about a lot and something that he worked on, about being present in a situation, not operating on autopilot in our lives. In other words, much of the time, we're not conscious of what's going on inside ourselves. This can be in a trivial level. Perhaps one's reading a book or watching a film or a shir or something like that, and at the same time as one's eating something. And one doesn't even notice that after someone says to you, what was the supper? And you have absolutely no idea. You don't even notice getting through the bowl of food, because one was doing something and not conscious and aware and present in what else was going on. And here Rav Wolbe is talking about consciousness raising, being present and aware and alert in the situation. This is a slight aside, but there's a Gemara in Brachas, which is talking about the concept of making a bracha. One of the reasons we make brachas is consciousness raising, to raise our awareness of what we're doing. So we make a bracha before we do a mitzvah, as a preparation for doing the mitzvah. I'm about to do the mitzvah, but I don't want to do the mitzvah on autopilot. I want to do it prepared for the fact that I'm commanded to do it, and therefore I make a bracha on the mitzvah. Similarly, when we eat something, we make a bracha, so I have a chance to reflect and be conscious of what I'm about to do, so that I'm experiencing it and appreciating the gift of what I have and ascribing it back in gratitude to Hashem. I think I've mentioned in this series of shiurim, when we were still seeing each other face to face as opposed to via Zoom, that the Gemara takes this idea in a remarkable direction, and it quotes the pasuk, which we say regularly in davening, Kol neshama tahalelka. Every neshama, every soul should praise God. We say this in Pesukei Zimra from Tehillim, and it translates the word neshama in this context to as neshima, as a breath. And the Gemara says, Kol neshima tahalelka. On every breath, we're meant to praise God. That means to say, in peak achievement, and the Gemara brings there were those who were like that, who al kol neshima on neshima, on every breath they were conscious of taking the breath, and tahalelka, they would praise God in so doing. So we spend a lot of our time not conscious of breathing, but if we paused for a few moments and were aware of the experience of breathing, then we would be more alive, we'd be more present, we'd be more conscious and aware of what we're going through. And then, kol neshama tahalelka, every moment and every breath could be, if we so chose it, an experience of thanking and appreciating God. So this is a consciousness that Rav Wolbe is saying that the Bali Musa demands of us, those who take these things seriously. So what we're going to do now is we're going to read the paragraph inside. It's a rather technical paragraph, for which I apologize in advance, about the halachas of a shavua, of making oaths. But then we're going to see the very beautiful way Rav Wolbe brings us into practical character development. So we're here in the second half of page Kafei, and he quotes a Gemara in Shavuos that we said, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught us, Ha'adam b'Shvua, the pasuk says that when a Shavua is made, you need the Ha'adam, the person has to be present in the Shavua. Prat la'onus, this excludes a case where someone accidentally makes the Shavua. Rashi comments on this, Ha'adam b'Shvua, she'adam b'shas Shavua, a person has to be a human being when they make a Shavua. She'libo olav, that their heart is engaged, their consciousness, we would say in modern English, is engaged with this. Prat la'onus, as opposed to when someone is doing so in a state of lack of consciousness, lack of awareness. Could go in b'shvura, as the Gemara explains later, for example, a oath said about something in the past, and a person is sure that what they are saying is true. And then the Gemara Sham, in the Gemara there it comments, and it tells the story we just said. What's an example of being honest, of not being fully conscious? The story of Rav Kahana and Rav Asi, two very honest people, students of their teacher, One said, I make a shavua that this is what my teacher taught us. Another one says, I make a shavua that something else was taught to me by my teacher. When they came in front of their teacher, he said like one of them and not like the other. The other one said, did I say an oath as a lie? Your heart forced you into this. You weren't fully present, and Rashi explains, he thought that what you were saying was emet, he thought that what you were saying was true. Someone made an oath with a certainty that this is the truth, but their heart deceived them. And therefore this isn't called a person who's present at the time of the oath. And again, there's such a Revolba is bringing out of this such a powerful message. How many times are we in an argument with someone or a debate with someone or a discussion with someone, and we are sure that we remember the situation perfectly? And yet we know from so many psychological tests that our perception warps and distorts that what we see, and our consciousness, our bandwidth of consciousness is so narrow that we can be completely unaware of something else going on at the time. There's very famous studies in which people are given a task to do. For example, to notice in a football match how many times the football has been kicked. And after the task is done, they're asked the number and they say, we saw the ball being kicked 34 times or whatever it is. And they didn't notice that during the football clip in the background, a person dressed up as an ape walked across the pitch or something like that. They're completely unaware of this because they were focusing on something else. They're focusing on the on counting the number of kicks in the football. Studies like that. So what's happening here then is we're only living half aware, half alive of what's going on. Now this may not matter in the case of the football pitch, but this can matter when it comes to our relationships to others. And in a few moments, Revolba's going to say it matters even more when it comes to our relationship to ourselves. Because we live in a world in which we are convinced that we are perfect recording machines. We're convinced we're perfectly aware of what's going on. And we are also convinced that we are perfectly transparent to ourselves, that we know our own motives and we're conscious of what's really driving us and motivating us. And this is how this ties up to the previous paragraph of, ties in rather to the previous paragraph of Revolba, in which we downplay the degree to which our physical bodies affect us and control us and influence how we see a situation. And greatness, Revolba said, the first stage of greatness, the first stage of character development is realize you're not just a body. Realize you're a spiritual being. But that can only go so far, because the later stage of development is to go back and realize, yes, but I'm embodied, I exist in a body, and this affects me more than I realize, such that even these great figures, Rav Kahana and Ravasi, have simply a different recollection of the same event. And how many arguments can be avoided? How many Dinei Torah and Beis Din are caused by two sides who are absolutely sincere, absolutely convinced that what they're saying is what really happened, and are unaware of the fallibility of our perception so much of the time. And therefore, Revolba carries on and he says, Hava Omer, the implication of this Gemara is, Hanishma Badat Barura, one who makes an oath with a clarity of vision, Belishum Ta'ot V'haloma, with no mistake and no error. Not that they just think that this is the truth, but this is really the truth. It's possible that they're making an oath with perfect knowledge and logic. But if the facts are not like that and their hearts trick them, this isn't a person who is present. This almost brings out the idea that when we're talking at least about a shavua in the past, a deliberate lie, that's what the pasuk is talking about. An accidental lie where I am convinced what I'm saying is the truth, that's not a shavua sheker, because the person wasn't really present. Carries on therefore a Volba, we learn from here, when we talk about what is a human being, it means someone who has honest self-knowledge, without anything being hidden or any mistake in their self-perception. Hadat hi ha'odom shav odom. If we ask ourselves what is that which is most elevated in a human being, it's transparent and honest self-observation. Only that is what we really mean by an odom. So in the previous paragraphs, Revolba's told us what is an odom. It's this complicated mix. It's this intensely spiritual being, able to speak ponim el ponim, face to face to God. On the other hand, odom is this intensely physical being, made up of blood and carbon and brain chemistry floating around. So what is the unifier between these two? Only honest self-knowledge, only heightened consciousness and awareness of what's going on. If we want to have a chance of unifying these varied aspects of ourselves, then the only way to do so is if we're conscious and aware of what's going on in our inner lives. If we're not conscious and aware of it, then we'll never have a hope. We'll never be able to bring together these parts. And that takes, as Revolba is going to say, an honest admission as to that which is positive and good and great within us, and also that which is lonely and weak and poor within us. If we're in denial about that aspect of ourselves, then we'll never be able to bring them all together. And therefore concludes Revolba in this paragraph, Dovar Godol hin learned mekan. We learn something great from here. A person who is in full clarity of mind, who shakuf legamri la'atzmos, is completely transparent to themselves, the amiti legamri, and honest to themselves, as regards the external reality. Adam hashakuf hazeh, someone who's completely transparent in this way, their internal qualities are also clear to them. Meremes midagosov ad shiflus yitzarov, from the romamus dagosov, from that which is most elevated within themselves, all the way to that which is lowest within themselves. Gamba omdom amatzov gavoa, even when they're in a very elevated state. Alei, they're not in denial about instability. And that person has the potential to make a mistake and to end up creating a lot of damage. The dafka dart makifazos, only this all-encompassing perspective, is that which smooths out the possibility of a straight path in life, with the best use of the positive within us and the avoidance of that which is negative within us. So when we're in an elevated state of spirituality, when things are going well, when we're feeling that we're working on ourselves, when we're feeling our relationships are strong, when we're feeling we have a genuine deep sense of emunah and trust and connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At that point, it's vital to remind ourselves, this is all fantastic, but there's a part of me that isn't up to that. And I need to be honest about that and realize that situations change. And the situation I'm in at the moment isn't going to be a permanent one, because tomorrow I'll be irritated and overtired and I'll have eaten some food that disagrees with me. And for trivial, nonsensical reasons of chemistry, I'll be feeling rotten and I'm not going to be in this elevated state. And when I'm feeling down and when things are tough and I'm feeling disconnected, we need to remind ourselves the same thing. This doesn't necessarily indicate anything about the reality of my situation. Am I really seeing it clearly? Am I really behaving correctly? And how many decisions do we take, whether it's in our relationships, in marriage, whether it's in work? How many decisions do we take, perhaps foolishly so, based upon the assumption that we're seeing the situation correctly? Based upon how I'm feeling at this particular moment in time, reflects the reality, the genuine reality of the external world. And therefore, this is the note of caution that he's emphasizing to us over here, that we, human beings, have all these disparate parts, but perhaps the part that unites them all is our tragic ability to fool ourselves, our tragic ability to be in denial about an aspect of ourselves. And it's only by very rigorously checking that we are conscious of the truth and aware of it, and conscious of our own internal truth, that we can be confident that what we are doing reflects accurately the reality, and also will integrate all the parts of ourselves. If we think by denying that which is negative in ourselves, we can beat it, then that won't happen. The only way we can deal with that which is negative in ourselves is by accepting it's there, knowing ourselves, and then we can address it. So this is the next piece of Revolba, which is going to take further in the next few paragraphs that we look at. I see there's a question on the chat group. Okay, so the question that was asked was, if we know that humans have fallible perception, why are we not held responsible? So that's a very important question. We are held responsible. We absolutely are held responsible. When it comes to a shavua, to an oath, uniquely, an oath is only one for which we're culpable if it's made with a complete clarity. However, in our lives, if we don't buy into the fact that we can't always be sure about that which happened, then we're going to fail. Then we're going to mess up. the ability of our perceptions to alter how we see things, that there's nothing we can do about. The responsibility to realize that that happens, that we are responsible for. There is a Tosfos who expresses this view on many, many occasions. And he says that it's perfectly possible that once we are in a situation, we are indeed onus, as per the Shur that we spoke about. We're not culpable once we're in the situation for how we behave. But who asked us to get into that situation? And this is an example of this. Once we're in a situation where this is our perception, this is our memory, it can be very impossible, almost challenging to rid ourselves of how we saw the situation. But we need to know that just because that's how we saw it, isn't that the way it is? And perhaps our perceptions are colored, and a phrase or a turn of language that's used by someone can remind us or mean to us something based upon childhood memories of how this language was used. And we can completely misinterpret what's really going on, what's really being said. And so much of hurt and upset in our connections and interactions with each other are caused by us forgetting how just because we saw or understood something one way doesn't mean that in an absolute sense this is what the person said or meant and intended. Before we go further, any other questions about what we read? Okay, so let's try and look at one more piece of Revolba on this topic, and then we'll stop for tonight. And here we're going to jump to the second half of the next page. The next page is labeled Kaf Vov 26, and I want to jump to the second half of the page. And here Revolba quotes a most remarkable and difficult Gemara, and we'll read the Gemara and then we'll discuss what he says. This is the second half of the page. It's the paragraph that begins with the letter Vov. The Omar Rabbi Eliezer said, Rabbi Eliezer, Kol Odom she'ein lo karka, eino Odom. A person who doesn't possess or own land is not an Odom. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Hashamayim shamayim laHashem. The heavens belong to God. Va'oret nosan livnei Odom. And the earth, the land, was given to human beings. Now, normally when we read the pasuk, what do we think it means? The heavens, that which is beyond, that which is spiritual, belong to God, and the earth, physical existence, is ours. But Rebbe Lezer seems to be understanding this almost literally. And he says anyone who doesn't own land isn't a person. And Revolba draws out of this such a profound and new and important way of looking at what a human being is. That's this topic. What is an Odom? Mahu Odom? What does it mean to be a person? And he uses this Gemara to speak about it. And I'll summarize what he says outside before we read it inside. And he says that being a physical person, being someone who has land, who engages in farming and in producing food, has the potential to make us very earthy, to make us very physical, to make us very unsophisticated. In many languages, the word for someone who isn't an intellectual, isn't a knowledgeable person, is somehow a coarse and physical person, is a farmer, like a peasant. We talk about someone being a peasant. We want to say they're not very cultured and sophisticated. In Hebrew, we have the same thing. We talk about an ha'aretz. Someone is ignoramus. We use the word ha'aretz, a person of the land. So being an earthy person very often means we're physical, we're unsophisticated, we're not developed. And yet here the Gemara is telling us, Rabbi Eliezer is telling us, that every person needs to own a bit of land. We all need to have a little patch in the allotment. We all need to engage in some vegetable growing. Why is this? So that we can be earthed. If we're not earthed as people, then it's very dangerous. Because then again, we're not understanding what we are. And we can go off into flights of fantasy in which we think that we are spiritually developed. We think that what we're doing is genuine ruchnius, is genuine spirituality, but it's completely out of touch with what Hashem really wants us to be. So we've run out of our allotted time now, but please God, next week we'll start from here, and we'll have a look at how Revolba continues this idea. But in the meantime, Revolba leaves us with this passing thought. All of us need to go out in our gardens and start doing a little bit of gardening. We all need to ensure we don't want to be amaratzim, we don't want to be peasants, we don't want to be immersed in coarse physicality, but we need to have some farming. We need to be something, getting our nails dirty with something. Otherwise, we won't be able to be what a human being is really meant to be. we'll stop there, and please God, we'll carry on next week with looking at what this means.